Hello and welcome to the Combi Dog. My name is Jonathan and today I'm going to be welding up a steel bumper to replace my flimsy plastic OEM bumper on my T1N Sprinter. You're going to want to stick around for this. It's going to be entertaining. We got to start with removing the hitch that I have on the van as well as the OEM bumper, so let's get going on that. So once the bumper is off, you still have these two side brackets to remove. And I read that you can gently pry these two rivets off. They're like expanding rivets that pop in and expand outward. So supposedly you can gently pry them off. I have not found that to be the case. They're not prying off for me. So I'm gonna take a little bit more dramatic of approach and drill them out. Now on to actually look at the pieces of metal that we're going to weld together. So if I gave you the impression that I was just going to cut out a bunch of metal myself and weld it all together for a new bumper, well, that's only partially true. Actually, I'm going with a kit from Coastal Offroad out of Canada, and they designed the bumper, they laser cut out all the pieces and ship them to you, and now I'm using their step-by-step guide to try to put it together. Okay, so these are all the pieces that come laser cut out from Coastal Offroad, and had them laid out and numbered just to help keep me a little bit more organized. And starting with number one piece, it actually requires a little bit of modification to the body of the van. So let me show you what we have to do with that. So hopefully you can see this. This is right underneath one of the main rails of the unibody of the Sprinter. And these two holes here, the number one piece of metal has to bolt onto here, I believe like this. But it has this lip on the body that needs to come off. So I need to cut off about an inch, looks like about an inch deep, and then I need to cut probably about 2.5 inches or so off of this to make this piece lay flat up against the body. So we're going to get that marked out and then we will jigsaw that out. So this is my mark. I will just jigsaw out following along this line here. Okay, so that went pretty well. I think I was able to just follow the jigsaw along the underside of the frame pretty well. And so I'm just going to file off some of these sharp edges, and then I'll put the number one piece in there, bolted in, and see how it fits. Here is one bolted on, just like what I was showing you underneath. And I went ahead and put number two part on and got them, I think it's squared up. We'll have to see how it aligns with the other side. Now the other side, I went ahead and did it too. And here's something that gives me a little bit of concern. I'm not sure if you can see it on video, but number one part here is at quite a bit of an angle. The other side looks pretty much at a right angle to two, but this is quite a bit of an angle, and I don't know why. And I'm not sure what I can do about it, or if it's okay just to go ahead and weld up as is, since it's made to the frame as it is. So we'll go on to the next step, get parts 3 and 4 ready to go. So Coastal Offroads leaves a thin piece of metal attached to part 3 that needs to be removed. They leave it on there just to make it a little stiffer during shipment so it doesn't bend, but now I need to take it off. This is pretty thick metal, but I'm hoping that I can take it off with a jigsaw rather than having to put a metal cutting blade onto a circular saw. So let's see how this goes. I have it marked off here and ready to cut. Okay, that went real easy. Cut right through it with just the jigsaw. So the next thing is to align all the parts up together that we've done so far, 1 through 4. So these are parts number 4, and they slide on through these extensions of number 2, and then 3, sets up on top. Now, can I line these up? How do they look? So remember this piece that I cut off of this top plate that's meant to stabilize the top plate during shipment. I'm not sure what it does because there was all sorts of wave in this top plate that happened and assumed during shipment. And because of that, I could not get this thing to lay flat and get the whole thing aligned to save my life. I tried so many different methods, it just didn't work. So what I ended up doing was taking this whole thing off and taking it into my garage where I have a flat table where I could clamp this whole thing down, make sure it was squared, aligned, and then tack these 3 pieces onto the top plate, brought it back out on the van. That's working really well. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back on the flat table, tack this bottom piece on, these front face plates, and these side wings, which go, if I show you right over here. So they say you should do this on the vehicle to make sure that you have an even spacing along this edge and the van, but with this butted up on the top plate, I'm not sure where else it's gonna go anyway. I just held that in place, measured side to side, and there's a matter of a few millimeters difference. So I think that's gonna work just fine. So I'm clamped down and don't know how this will video, but let's give it a shot. So here's what it's looking like so far, and I gotta be honest, I'm actually pretty happy with it. I hope I don't sound too surprised or anything, but considering all the different angles there are to make and my lack of experience and lack of probably proper fabricating jigs and clamps and so forth, I'm pretty happy with that. And moreover, if you measure at this point here to the edge of the van and bottom side of the edge of the van, and then do that left and right side, there is only about 2 millimeters difference from one side to the other. I think that's pretty good for me. I'm pretty happy with that. So the next question is how to put the next bottom pieces on, which are going to angle down, complex compound angles going down and in. I don't see, again, any way that I can do this per the recommendations to do it on the van. I think with the equipment that I have, with the tools that I have, I think I have to pull this bumper back off, back into the garage onto my table, and let's get back into the garage. So I got this first plate here, number 16, angled in at about 55 degrees. The next one over is about 62-ish degrees off the level. The other side's matching that. So the fact that these both came together pretty evenly, I'm just hoping that once I tack those in place, that then I can go the rest of the way. The last 3 pieces on this bottom will align equally as well. So I want you to see this. I got it clamped on pretty solidly on both ends. Both ends are pretty much where they need to go. But look at this bow. Look at that gap in between the center part where it needs to go down. But I think I can put enough pressure on that while I weld it, while I tack it, to take that out. Now I'm gonna have some gaps that here and there that hopefully I can fill with welding rod. That's probably, again, not ideal, but yeah, I think maybe that's gonna work. So I was able to get that all tacked in place and take out all that bow, and there wasn't even that much of a gap. So that took out most of the gap as well. So it's tacked in place. I put it back on the van. Take a look at this. I think it looks pretty good, and I'm starting to get pretty excited because I think it's going to turn out better than anticipated. I hope anyway. I think it's looking really good. I'm pretty stoked about that. And before I put it on, I went ahead and re-leveled out, made sure all of my frame mounting points were all level and secure, and I actually got a little bit more accuracy on side to side of this. I'm only probably less than a millimeter off on either side, and I actually can't believe that. I'm super excited about that. Things are looking really good. The next thing to do is to set up these corner end caps and get those tacked in place, and that's the first thing that the instructions actually say to do on a flat surface. So I'm finally going to be doing something per the instructions instead of just kind of winging it on my own. So the end caps or end pieces are these 5 parts right here, and here in the instructions, if I can turn the page, is what they have them look like, all tacked up together, and then one of them set in place here. So this is my setup here with a series of magnets and a few clamps that I have it held in place pretty securely and got it tacked together. I think I'll go ahead and weld it up. So I got it welded up. It's just sitting on here right now, but I think it looks pretty good. Look at this, look how close this is. It just lines up so well. I'm just really impressed by that. And now there is this one little tiny gap here, which I'm not sure why that happened, but remember that piece, that little stabilizing piece that I cut off of the top plate? Well, I'm just gonna cut a couple little pieces off of it for either side, because the other side looks exactly the same. Put a little piece in there and weld it up when I put the whole thing together, and that will solve that, I'm pretty sure. So here's the end cap on the other side, where you can see that I've mostly ground down fairly smoothly all the welds. I need to do a bit more work in smoothing that out, smoothing the transitions, getting a finer wheel on to clean up some of the deep grind marks, and then fill in the same gap here I showed you over on the other side. But first, let me show you, go underneath the van and show you where the bumper needs to be tacked on, what we need to do under there. I forgot to show you these 3 pieces clamped to my table and tacking them together. I wanted to get those in real quick because there's 2 of these assemblies, obviously one on either side, and they bolt through the body of the van into the framework for yet another mounting point for the bumper. So I just want to show you that before we move on. So kind of tight quarters under here. Hopefully this focuses in okay. But if you remember, this is the bracket and this is the bolt, one of 2 bolts that held on the OEM bumper. So it'll hold on this new bracket that then needs to be tacked onto top and rear of the bumper. And then this larger bracket here would be what, like my trailer hitch, bolted onto the main frame of the unibody going front to back, and then its sub part here goes onto a cross member for the unibody going across the back of the van. So it needs to be welded across here, and then both of them onto the top and back of the bumper. So I'll get those all tacked on. I'm probably not going to film this underneath because I don't want to destroy my camera. So you'll see it again when it is off the van, back in the garage, ready for welding and then finish grinding. So when I started grinding the welds, I was using this 1/4 inch metal grinding disc that came with my angle grinder. And it was working, but it was going really slow and honestly not leaving that great of a finish. I decided to try one of these flap type grinding discs, and I didn't really think that they would work that well on steel, but they work remarkably well. This is a 60 grit and I have a 40 grit on the grinder right now. And I don't know, it's probably like 10x faster, and as a bonus, it leaves a much nicer finish, even with the 40 grit. I'll probably switch eventually to the 60 and then maybe go to an 80, I'm not sure. And then maybe finish down to using a orbital palm sander with a 110 or 120. We'll see how that looks when I get that far. But for right now, let me show you how the 40 grit works on this little corner piece here. So there, not too bad. It's has a few flat spots here and there that hopefully when I go to a finer grit wheel or finer grit sandpaper with a orbital palm sander, that hopefully I can smooth that out and make that look a little bit better. We'll see when we get there. So far looking pretty good. So in typical fashion for me, I picked a day to do the bulk of my welding and grinding on a day when it's about 103 degrees outside here in Boise, Idaho. But I'm just going to tack on these 2 end pieces, the two corner pieces. And once I get those on, then I'm gonna go ahead and pull the whole bumper off, move it back into the garage where I can do the rest of the welding and grinding, where it's about at least 10 or 15 degrees cooler. The bumper pulled off really easily, much easier than I was expecting it to. Hopefully it will go back on just as easily when I get ready to put it back on. I wanted to show you what it looks like here off before the rest of the welding is done and the weld grinding has been completed, but looking pretty good. So the rest of the welding and grinding on the table went really pretty well. When I started doing a lot of the grinding of the welds, I realized I got to a point that I thought, you know, it's going to be better if I put the bumper back on the van, where I have better access to some of those welds and can kind of look at it, kind of even it out from left to right a little bit better. So I did that, and the good news is it went on, again, really easily, went really well. I did have some warping. Both sides were pulled out a little bit, but I was able to use the OEM bumper mounts there, those couple bolt holes, bolts in there, that was able to actually pull all of that warp out. I didn't buy the Coastal Offroad's hitch mount that they sell with the package. It's like an extra 75 bucks. Wish I would have now. I did though, just off Amazon, bought I think it's a Warren receiver, just a raw steel one, that it's going to work fine. Would have rather had the Coastal Offroad one. So if you're going to do this, go ahead and just save yourself the headache. If you want to hitch, get the Coastal Offroad one. I'm going to tack this on here pretty quick, do a little bit more weld grinding while I have it on the van, and I'm going to pull it off, and last little bit go around of some touch-up grinding, and then I'm going to be ready for paint. So a couple of other things I wanted to point out is, on some of these inside corners, whether you're on the outside edges over here or in here or on these toe mounts here, on the inside corners, you just can't get into them with this sort of a flat disc grinder. But I did find these radiused edge ones that work just really well. This weld bead along here, I know it's not very pretty, but that's me. That's as good a welding as I can do. But look over on the other side where I did use that radius grinding wheel, and it did a pretty nice job. There's some light scratches there. I think are going to be hidden just fine with the paint. A couple places I do want to still touch up once I get the bumper off and can access them better. But overall, I think it looks pretty good. All right, let's get this bumper off. Well, here it is, finished and installed. I used a roll-on bed liner to paint the bumper and decided to do the whole van while I was at it. I think it looks pretty good for a novice. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And if you're interested in my other DIY and off-grid projects, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.